Good morning, everyone. I think people are starting to let in. Welcome to a beautiful Saturday morning in Nashville. Our guest today is Amy Bryant, who is the director of the Office of Conservatorship Management for Nashville and Davidson County through, I guess it would be the best way to describe it is through the court system. Amy, we are very glad you're here today. And while we're letting people in, we usually take the first 2 or 3 minutes to just talk about something interesting, like that thing that's behind your head, that the artwork that's behind your right shoulder. What is that?
It's a puzzle, Jim. It's a puzzle. I do puzzles in my spare time. And this puzzle is, nevertheless, she persisted. So it's a puzzle of famous women who did wonderful things. And it's just inspirational to me. So.
Who's on there? Who are a few people? It looks like, is that Amelia Earhart who's on there? I can't
Amelia
tell.
Earhart's in the middle. And then there is Eleanor Roosevelt. There's Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I don't think people can see her, but she's in the top left corner. And Sojourner Truth and Maya Angelou and Harriet Tubman and lots of different people are, different women are on there. I actually did this puzzle while I was listening to a book about famous women that Hillary Clinton and Chelsea Clinton did. I can't remember the name of that book, but
I saw that book the other day.
Same time. Mm-hmm.
I saw that book in the bookstore the other day. I had never seen it. I didn't know they had written a book about that. So
yeah, it's a really good book. I listen to books. I don't have the ability to actually read books, but I can listen to them.
And why do you not have the ability to read books?
I have 5 kids living in my house. So if I sit down too long and look like I'm relaxing, then I don't get a chance to read the book.
Well, I knew the answer to the question. That's why I asked it. Are you at home right now? I
am at home right now.
All right. So are any of the kids going to make an appearance during this, or have you locked them out?
No, they've all been instructed not to come back to the house before 11 o'clock.
Well, I will tell you that we had Judge Anna Escobar on last week, and she had cats that were making an appearance on her show. You could hear them in the background. She was trying to keep them off the screen, but they were busy. They were part of the interview. So if your kids come in, it's perfectly fine.
They won't come in. My husband will keep them away. But I do have a cat, so Skeeter might make an appearance, but I don't think so. I don't know where he is.
All right. Well, we have Judge Amanda Mcclendon is on the call today. So welcome, Judge Mcclendon. We're happy to have you. We'll be introducing people who show up on the call. I will ask you, you obviously have already been out this morning. And what did you do this morning?
I rode the Tour de Nashville this morning. I did 9 mile. I typically do the 25 miler each year, but I had to do this, so I cut it short.
I am so sorry that we had to cut you short.
It's okay.
So I had a little bit of knee surgery yesterday. It wasn't that big of a deal. I'm already up moving around, but I could not. But that's my excuse for not doing the Tour de Nashville, even though I'm not sure if I've ever actually done that. I usually run. But that's why I had to have the surgery, because I'm stopped running for a little while.
Oh, gotcha. I am definitely not a runner. I like to bike, but I don't run.
Well, some people don't think I'm a runner either, even when they see me running. I think I see some people on this call today who have seen me out running, and I don't know if they would call me a runner either, but I do move. Some people think I'm moving backwards, but I am moving forwards. I tore my meniscus and I had to go get it fixed. So I can't, I should be up and running in about 3 or 4 weeks, I think. So I'm good.
That'd be good.
Well, let's get started. You've already had a full day. I was able to get out of bed and hobble to the couch and then get over. No, I'm good. Amy Bryant is our guest. She's the director of the Office of Conservatorship Management. Chancellor Pat Moskal is on the phone. And we have, again, Judge Amanda Mcclendon is on the phone. We'll keep letting people know. We're really glad you're here, Amy. Tell me, the first question I usually ask everybody is, tell me a little bit about yourself. Were you born in Nashville? How did you get to Nashville if you weren't? And how did you get to this illustrious position?
Okay, so I'm from Memphis, Tennessee, and I'm the oldest of 4 children. And I went to TSU, so that's how I got to Nashville. I'm the first person in my family to go to college and graduate from college. And so TSU brought me here, go Big Blue. Today is actually the 17th anniversary of my graduation from TSU. Facebook let me know that this morning.
Good.
And so that's how I arrived here. After TSU, I went to St. Louis U for law school. And after those 3 years, I came back to Tennessee to practice real estate law. That was in 2007. And I did that for a short period of time until the real estate market crashed. I am married. I have 4 children. They are 5, 7, 9, and 17. And I just recently brought in my nephew, and he is 10. So I have 5 kids in my house currently. But my oldest, he is graduating from Hillsborough on Wednesday. So guess I'll have 4 kids again after he goes off to college. And so I'm married to Julian Bryant, and we've been married 10 years this year. And we met Latin dancing. So in addition to doing puzzles and biking, I do Latin dancing.
Excuse me, what was that last thing you said? Latin
dancing. Yes. We used to teach Latin dancing for 5.5 years at Coleman Rec Center. We taught a class every Tuesday, Latin dance class every Tuesday. So I do that when I have free time too. But
and when is that? When is that free time that you have?
I just make it. So I'm really good at time management. So, you wake up at 5 and you go to sleep at 11, and then you do a whole lot in between those hours. So that's how that happens. And so prior to after I worked for a title company here in 2007, and the real estate market crashed, I went into private practice. And so I was in private practice for about 7 years before I went to the Division of TenCare. So I was one of their lead attorneys there at the Division of TenCare. And then when I was ready to leave there, I found this position. It was a position that I didn't even know existed. And I found, since having this position, that a lot of people don't know that this office exists. And so I applied for it, and then I got the position. And so I've been the director for the Office of Conservatorship Management since 2018, since December of 2018. And I must say it's the best job I've ever had.
So it's a good segue into what is it? And well, let me first ask, who appoints it? And officially, who do you kind of work for? But then tell us, what does it do? What's the position do? Okay,
so I don't think there's an appointment of any kind. I'm the second director for the Office of Conservatorship Management. It started in 2014, in July of 2014 is when the office started. And so that was an interview process. My direct supervisor is Tim Townsend. So he's the trial court administrator. Mm-hmm. And I report to him, but I don't know. My office is kind of an aside with the trial courts because the other people who report to him all work for the courts and work for all the judges. And so that's where my office sits. That's how it is. That's how it's situated within the government. Okay. And then the Office of Conservatorship Management was put in place as a result of a volunteer task force that Judge Kennedy put together back in 2013. And as a result of that, the task force recommended that an office be created to assist with conservatorships or manage conservatorships. I think the idea was more so for this office to replace the public guardian that was in place in Davidson County at that time. However, once this office was put in place, it was put in place as a second level of oversight for conservatorships within Davidson County. And so our office performs welfare visits for individuals under conservatorship in Davidson County. And then we do financial reviews and financial audits for individuals under conservatorship in Davidson County. And so currently in Davidson County, there are about 2,400 or a little over 2,400 conservatorships over person, property, or both. And so we review those cases. In addition to that, we provide resources for the individuals under conservatorship and for the conservators. We train conservators and potential conservators. We manage an independent conservatorship panel for individuals that do not have a family member or friend that can be their conservator. And so I manage that list. which includes lawyers, non-lawyers, and agencies, similar to GNRC. And let's see, what else do we do at that office? We do quite a few things that are that assist people with conservatorships. I'm not allowed to give legal advice. If there are any concerns that arise, I litigate those cases before Judge Kennedy or before Judge Mcclendon, who's on, and bring those concerns to their attention, whether that conservator needs to be replaced or there's something that the court needs to address. That occurs as well.
Okay, so let's go back and take it kind of piece by piece, because what I do, as you know, during my day job is I'm head of the Commission on Aging and Disability. We have a state public guardian who has district public guardians across the state. And we have a district public guardianship program in GNRC, which is the Greater Nashville Regional Council. You just mentioned that.
Right.
So does your office, do you all take cases, or no? You are overseeing the cases in Davidson County, but do you all end up with any public or conservatorship cases?
No, we don't end up with any conservatorship cases. GNRC is one of the entities that we do audits for and reviews for, and so they fall under our purview. Any conservatorship within Davidson County is one that we will oversee, but we will never have a conservatorship. I think that would be a conflict of interest. I would hope that Judge Kennedy never appoints us to be conservator, or Judge Mcclendon.
Okay.
I don't think that would happen, though. I don't know how we could audit or review ourselves. So I think that would be a conflict of interest.
Well, obviously this is of interest to lots of people, because as either as we have aging parents or aging relatives, and we get concerned about their ability to function on their own. We have a number of cases that come through our network, you know, where people are coming through. But I guess for people watching this today and watching it later, difference between a conservatorship and a guardianship. Is there any real true difference between the two?
Yes, in Tennessee there is. Nationally, the words are used interchangeably, but in Tennessee, a guardianship is for a child. So a person under the age of 18, whereby their parent or some other person is appointed by the court to make decisions for them, typically regarding their money. There have been some cases in probate court where guardianships are solely for the care of the child, but typically it's for individual children who have record deals or other contracts, modeling contracts, or they've acquired money due to the death of someone or they've inherited a lot of money. And so those are guardianships over children. Conservatorship is an appointment by the court over an adult with a disability or an incapacity that renders them unable to make decisions for themselves. And so a conservator could either be over the person, and so that person is charged with making decisions regarding the day-to-day life of an individual. Essentially, that adult becomes the child of the conservator, and the conservator is making decisions about their physical welfare. And then a conservator over the property is charged with making decisions that are in the best interest of the person with the disability over their property. And so that's all of their property, personal property, real property, anything that person owns. The conservator is charged with being responsible for that and making sure that the person continues to have an estate to survive on.
Okay, so I'm going to try to lead you through kind of the process. If I forget something, let me know, but I'm going to start with like, how does somebody get into this system? You know, where do these cases kind of arise from? Who's bringing them, and how do they get filed in front of the appropriate judge? And I guess what I'm saying is, you know, let's say that I have an aging relative that starts showing this stuff, and I realize that somebody is going to have to step in and manage maybe her physical health, those healthcare decisions, and assets, because you worry about people swindling and taking and scamming and things like that. How does the initial case end up where somebody is appointed to be a conservatorship, and how does that first stage work?
Okay, so there are several different ways that a conservatorship can be established. The first one that I'll acknowledge would be one where there's an emergency where the person is within a hospital. And so an expedited limited healthcare fiduciary could be appointed for an individual that lacks capacity, that doesn't have an individual designated to make healthcare decisions for them. And so by statute, that is a short-term appointment for a person to make decisions for an individual that cannot make decisions for themselves. In that regard, if that individual continues to need a person to make decisions for themselves after that, then that could become a long-term conservatorship. Typically, that's people who have been injured in a car accident or some sort of traumatic brain injury that they've sustained that renders them in a hospital in Davidson County, because we are a regional hub for hospitals, and then those individuals need someone to make decisions for them. Another way is any interested party. So an interested party is a person that is familiar with that individual, that sees that that person may lack capacity to make decisions, or someone may be taking advantage of them. And then you can do an emergency conservatorship, and those are temporary as well. And those would come before Judge Mcclendon in Second Circuit. And those conservatorships, typically a petition is filed by an attorney. A layperson can file a petition if they want to, but for an emergency conservatorship, it is just a more difficult process for an individual to navigate by themselves. And so those come before the court. There must be a hearing on those cases within 5 days. And then the court makes a decision based on the incapacity and disability of the individual to determine if they need an emergency conservatorship. And then that's granted on a short-term basis for 60 days. Typically, if the lawyer that filed that case knows that the individual will need a conservatorship longer, then they'll do an oral motion or file a motion to amend their petition to extend that longer to a full conservatorship.
And the lawyers who are bringing those, particularly coming out of hospitals, are hospital lawyers They are private firms that have been hired to do these for the hospitals. And okay. So the main hospitals here have a few firms that they use to file those expedited limited healthcare fiduciaries. The emergency conservatorships are filed by any probate lawyer where an emergency arises and a person needs an individual to make decisions for them quickly. The other cases that are conservatorships can be lots of different things. The most common one would be an individual that was born with a disability or sustained a disability while they were a child. And so once they reach the age of 18, their parents will need to file for conservatorship so they can continue to make medical decisions for them and other decisions for them with life. And we've actually put together a program for that I can go into later after I'm done talking about conservatorships to help those families. In addition to that, if there are elderly people or sometimes not so elderly people, there may be people that have a mental incapacity. Sometimes people with addiction can come under a conservatorship. The conservatorship's probably not the best thing for them though, but those people also could come under a conservatorship. So if there's an individual like yourself and you had, like, let's say a neighbor that you saw was somehow being taken advantage of, or you saw that was just having trouble taking care of themselves, you could petition the court for a conservatorship for that individual. All conservatorships require medical evidence from a medical doctor, and it must be a medical doctor. I've had questions about whether a nurse practitioner can provide that information, and they cannot. And so a medical doctor must complete a report of physician form, and that must be submitted to the court. And then the court does a full review over whether that person has an incapacity or disability. If so, whether that incapacity or disability renders them unable to make certain decisions. And then if so, after that, whether they need a conservatorship, whether that conservatorship is temporary or permanent, and then what decisions the conservator will be allowed to make for that person. And so a conservator doesn't have the full autonomy to make decisions for an individual period. There are a list of enumerated powers that a person can be given.
And each one is tailored, at least in Davidson County, each one is tailored to the individual conservatorship.
Okay, so guardian ad litem come in play. Mm-hmm. Are they kind of the representatives of the court to go do that kind of investigation, that review of the individual, and then report back as to whether, in their determination, the individual needs a conservatorship?
Yes, a guardian ad litem is an attorney that is appointed by the court to be the eyes and ears of the court. And so that attorney is charged with serving the person with the disability with the petition so that they have read it and understand it, and doing a thorough review for the court to provide information regarding that person's assets, that person's state of living at the time, and anything the court may need to know to make a decision for that individual. In addition to guardian ad litems, there are attorney ad litems that are appointed as well. There are many people, as you can imagine, that do not want conservatorships, and their family members or friends think that they do. So if a person opposes a conservatorship, an attorney ad litem is appointed. In all emergency conservatorships, an attorney ad litem is appointed, and that person represents the person with the disability. So they are the lawyer for the individual that is subjected to the conservatorship, but that may not want that conservatorship.
Okay, so I've got a million different questions for you still. Okay. So looking at the hospital situations, looking at a next door neighbor, excuse me, next door neighbor calls in, and if the next door neighbor sees a situation where they think is may require some assistance, would they call into your office, or should they call Adult Protective Services, the Department of Human Services? Or do they do both?
Yeah. It depends. So they can call my office. Our office doesn't help people establish conservatorships, but we put them in the right direction, unless they fall into that category of children that are in public school. Mm-hmm. But everyone in Tennessee is a mandatory reporter. So if there are issues going on where Adult Protective Services needs to be alerted, then the person should do that. Now, Adult Protective Services will file a petition for conservatorship. However, if it's financial exploitation, it would have to be with government funds for APS to get involved. And then APS is not quick to file conservatorships for individuals if they can find another way to help that individual with a family or a friend or someone that can, step in to make decisions for them. I don't know. I don't think that it is their go-to to file a petition for conservatorship, but they should definitely be alerted if a person is being neglected or abused.
All right, so let's go back to something that people may not know. The state of Tennessee, I think, is maybe one of the, it may be the only state, if there may be two or three, but I know at one point, I thought we were the only state where Adult Protective Services, if you call them and it doesn't involve governmental funds, they don't investigate financial exploitation for those cases. It still could go to the DA or somebody else at TBI to investigate, but that's not in the parameters of what APS does, correct?
That is correct. And there is a Vapid task force that is that we have within Tennessee, and I believe every county probably has one. And I believe Vapid stands for Vulnerable Adult Protection Investigative Team. And so my office participates in that, and that's with the DA's office and APS and the police department and the TBI. And we meet monthly to discuss cases of financial exploitation that don't involve, well, that do involve financial funds from the government, but also the ones that don't. And so there is an agency or a group of individuals that look into those cases as well.
So for those of you watching, and for those of you who will watch this broadcast, people like Amy do a tremendous service to this city, this county, in terms of this whole area. It is so, it's interesting, it's intriguing, it's difficult, it's painful. There are parameters in place that you would go like, why are those parameters in place? And somehow we're all working through this. I know for the last 9 years at the Commission on Aging and Disability, this has been a very difficult task, trying to figure out how you make all these pieces work. And in fact, I'm leaving there in about a month, but this is probably going to be what's going to take up most of my time for the next month, because we have some issues floating around about trying to deal with how to make some of this work a little bit better. And it involves APS, and it involves our public guardians, and it involves trying to deal with people who have been on the other side, who have been abused, and we're trying to help. Let me ask you this. If to take some of the scariness out of, if you can, out of filing, you know, we are in Tennessee, which has a mandatory duty to report cases of abuse. Right. So if you think something is going on, you're supposed to call. There's a number to call. I don't have it in front of me, but you can certainly look it up to report elder abuse in Tennessee. And vulnerable adults, you can report all that. We're a mandatory duty to report. If they call in, let's say you don't know a lawyer, or let's say it's like, I'm not sure if I want to get involved in this, but I think something as bad is going on. What the call, I think, can be anonymous, but you can call in and make that phone call. And let's say that, you know, what happens when that call is made up? I think it goes to, initially would go to APS. And if there's not a lot of income involved or no family, then APS is going to step in and do something. Is that your understanding of kind of how it works? And then it eventually ends up in the court with a petition for conservatorship?
That is how it works. Sometimes there are times when individuals call my office to report, and then we report it to APS because they do not want to report it to APS. So then our office can report to APS. APS has a screening process. So there are certain cases that are doubt or that APS won't take action on. I don't know a whole lot about how their screening process works to say, you know, what cases will or won't. However, if abuse is reported to me and I have the name and the location of that individual, I definitely report it to APS through my office. That can be done online anonymously, and that can be done over the phone anonymously as well. And then APS takes a look into those cases. APS also reaches out to my office, especially if an individual that's reported to them has a conservator. And so we work together closely to make sure that the vulnerable adults are taken care of within Davidson County.
Okay, let me ask you about this. People are hesitant about calling in or going, it's time, you know, we're worried about this situation, worried about my neighbor. What are the, from your perspective and from your standpoint, what are the flags that you're looking for or that you see on a regular basis where it really is time to make that call and say, this person needs to be reviewed for conservatorship? You may not want to make it, but you know in your heart that it's the right time.
Right. Some of those instances are instances where you may have a person walking around with a lot of money on their person. We've seen that. You may have individuals who are driving and they get lost and they should no longer be doing that. You may have cases where people are calling to the home of an individual where they live alone and they're being exploited in a way that I'm not sure that everyone would see from the outside. But they may have lots of people coming in and out of their home that they're paying for things that they may not need to be paying for. There may be cases of an individual that can't leave their home or they're hoarding things within their home to the extent where they are no longer able to care for themselves. There are many different instances in which an individual may come under a conservatorship. Every case is unique. And so it could just be a number of things. If you feel that an individual may no longer be able to make adequate decisions and decisions that are in the best interest for their health or the best interest for their finances, then that's something that can be looked into. Like I said before, a medical doctor will have to say that that person has an incapacity or disability that renders them unable to make whatever the decision is. A lot of people have a power of attorney in place, and sometimes that power of attorney is making very bad decisions. Many times when we are reviewing cases, an individual will have a power of attorney that is taking advantage of the individual financially. So they may be trying to sell a home or have sold a house that the person lives in. I remember one case specifically where this individual sold the house of an elderly lady, put the lady in a nursing home, and failed to pay the nursing home despite the fact that they got the proceeds from the home. And so that's how that case got into court. The nursing home alerted either the court or APS, and I'm not really sure which, maybe both, that they weren't being paid. And that something was going on. And that's how it was discovered that her house was sold from under her. She was placed in a nursing home and they just left her there. So that happens too. Many times hospitals and nursing facilities will see the writing on the wall, or banks. There have been times where individuals are brought into the bank by a person, and then they take out large sums of money, and then the bank may alert APS, or I'm not sure who else they alert that that's going on.
Okay. All right. So, so I would encourage people to keep an eye out for situations. You, again, in your heart, you probably know when it's time, if you see a situation going on, or if it's a family situation, you may have to get family members involved in the discussion. And that leads to a whole nother area that we'll talk about maybe if we have time, and that is when the family fights. That's a whole nother issue. Okay, before I get to the next set of questions, we talked about this before we got on. A lot of people watch the movie I Care a Lot. Mm-hmm. I think you have not had the chance to watch it yet, but you know about it. Is that right? The movie is called I Care a Lot. It made me furious. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's a movie starring Rosamund Pike, who I think won a Golden Globe. I don't know. She may have won an Emmy. I don't know for it. It's one of those characters that you despise. I mean, she was so good at it. It made me want to call her up and say, I can't stand you. But it's about people taking advantage of conservatorships and having a doctor on the side who is declaring people not competent and ready for a conservatorship. The person's going like, I'm fine. What are you doing? And before anything happens, the person is in a nursing home getting meds to be quiet. And the conservatorship, the conservator, which in this case was this lady, was selling people's assets and pocketing a lot of the money and then keeping the people quiet. It's a really good movie to watch. How do we, your office is sort of just designed to watch for that. If people, you were just talking about situations going on, how do you find out about them, and how do you step in to make sure that, I mean, this movie will scare you if you watch it. Scared me. How do you make sure that stuff doesn't happen?
Okay, so our office is a second level of oversight. So in the state of Tennessee, individuals that are conservators are required to file annual accountings. But prior to the accounting being filed, they're required to file an inventory of the assets for that individual. And that's due within 60 days of their appointment. And then they're required to file an accounting. And accounting is essentially like a checkbook registry. There's a beginning balance, there's an ending balance, and you have to detail everything that happened in between that time. In addition to that, if a conservator wants to sell property that belongs to a person under conservatorship, they must get court approval for that. The court not only has to give approval for the sale, the court approves the contract, and then the court approves the final distribution of that. And in addition to that, there are motions that are filed. So if a conservator wants to spend an amount of money, typically over $1,000, but sometimes there are cases where individual or a conservator is not allowed to spend anything over $500, then they must file a motion with the court for that as well. And so those things happen statutorily. Our office steps in and takes it one step further. So we review every motion filed on a conservatorship that involves property, or a conservatorship generally, but typically that it's property. So we review every motion. And then if we have any issue with the motion, we alert the court. We also review every accounting for every case that has accountings, but the conservators provide that information. It's self-attested. When the conservators provide the information, we get the information directly from the financial institution. So we reach out to the bank, we reach out to title companies, we reach out to retirement companies to get the actual documentation, because sometimes people lie. And so
that's not true. No, that is true. Okay.
So during our review, we're able to see the actual credit card statements, bank statements, everything, because the information provided by the individual could be doctored. And so we do that as well. And so every case that requires accountings in Davidson County, and there are about 300 of those, we review those annually every year.
Okay.
And so in Davidson County, it would be very difficult for that to happen the way that it happened within that movie. I would hope within the full state of Tennessee, it will be difficult for that to happen as well. Our office is the only OCM within the state. I'm trying to change that, by the way. And so we would make sure that that doesn't happen. But in addition to that, Jim, we keep track of the number of conservatorships a person has. And so like within that movie, if she had 30 conservatorships, that's a person we would be watching because they have so many conservatorships to see what's going on with those cases. But also we do welfare visits. And so we would visit the person within the nursing home. And if there was something going on, or we felt that that person no longer had an incapacity or disability, we will file a review with the court. And there have been conservatorships terminated based on those welfare reviews because the person no longer has a disability or incapacity. So I think in Davidson County, we're very equipped to have that situation happen.
Well, so when you see the movie, you'll see different things. It's like, well, wait a minute, that can't happen. It's like, maybe it could happen. If they're that good at it, maybe they could. Particularly the drugging of the patients when they get into a nursing home where they can't really communicate what's going on and they look like they need help. Right. And they really didn't in the first place. Tell me this, because you were mentioning it, you can get out of conservatorships can be terminated. There are situations where people may need help for a certain period of time and then whatever happens, and then all of a sudden the conservatorship may no longer be necessary. How does that work?
That works by alerting the court. So someone can call my office. If my office is called, and we have been called by people under conservatorship that wanted to terminate their conservatorships, they can call my office. They could write a letter to the court through the clerk's office. By statute, any person under conservatorship can have a review hearing by requesting that. And then any individual that's involved in that person's life or agency that may be involved with that individual can submit information to the court that this conservatorship needs to be reviewed. Once that happens, then a report of physician can be provided to show that this person no longer has an incapacity or disability or no longer needs this conservatorship. And then the judge will review that and terminate that conservatorship. There are some conservatorships that are terminated fully, and then there are conservatorships that are amended so that that person has the ability to make certain decisions, but not other decisions. But each conservatorship should be tailored to the individual based on Tennessee law, and that's what's done in Davidson County.
Right. So if I'm a client, if I've got a conservatorship on me, and I want to terminate it, I think I'm okay now. I can actually write the letter to the court and say I would like to have my court review. I'd like to have my case reviewed. Is that correct?
Yes, okay. Or you can call my office, which happens often. People under conservatorship will call our office and let us know they no longer need a conservatorship or they have some sort of issue with their conservatorship, and we will report it to the court for them.
All right, so we have about 20 minutes left. Let's go into something that we run into in our offices, and I bet you do too, and that is family fights. Family fights over conservatorships. And I know you have to take a general perspective on it because you're not the court. Tell me how that works, because we did get a series of questions about how are the rates set for a conservatorship, how are they approved, what about reports back to the heirs, in terms of, well, this conservator is just taking all my mom's money and, I don't like it. And then you have fighting between the kids where the kids are going like, she doesn't need a conservatorship. The other ones are saying this, they do. And then I want to be the conservator. It's like, no, I don't trust my sister. Talk to us about it. What do you see and how do the courts remarkably try to get through this because that's very difficult. And I know there are state laws now. The Peter Falk case, and I think there was, forget who else was involved. Oh, Glenn Campbell may have been involved in that case in terms of families feeling like they were left out.
Right. So all of those things happen. Typically, with the family disputes, you will have one of the siblings that has been appointed to be power of attorney, and the other siblings are not happy with what's going on, or that sibling that's the power of attorney is not allowing the other siblings to see that parent. And so then they file a petition for conservatorship, hoping that that's going to resolve their issue. I have seen visitation schedules that Judge Kennedy has had to put in place so that siblings have specific designated days and time by which they can see their parent that's under conservatorship. I have seen the children being completely removed from the process and an independent conservator being appointed, either GNRC, yourselves, or any other agency, or one of the independent conservators are the conservators on the case. Sometimes that leaves them more upset because they don't have any control over what's happening with the money that belongs to their parents that they essentially think is theirs prior to their parent dying. That's a big issue. Another issue I've seen are trusts are involved. So there may be a trust that was established by the parents or by the family prior to the conservatorship being established. And sometimes those trusts come under the conservatorship. And then the court is in, control of what happens with the money under that trust. You have instances where the adult person or elderly family member has been providing gifts to their children, and that no longer happens once they are pulled under conservatorship unless that is approved by the court. We have issues with that. So you'll see motions about that from the children. Many times we will have where the children are fighting and they decide that there no longer needs to be an accounting that's due to the court so that the siblings can essentially, what I think, do with the money as they will or as they want to without the court knowing what's going on with that. So that happens too. So one of those questions that you spoke about with the fees and the heirs, all interested parties are required to be notified. So that annual accounting that's sent in every year, that should be sent to all the close relatives and the institution where the person may be located so that they are aware of that annual accounting. And like I said, that accounting should detail everything that's going on within that estate. If a motion is filed to sell property, that should be provided to all the interested parties. And so that's the family members that are close to that person as well. With the fees, it's the judge's job to approve the fees. And so there is no set fee schedule or amount that a conservator can charge. There are conservators that do not charge for their services. And typically those are friends and family members, and there are conservators that do. And so you must provide an affidavit in a detailed, register of what you did for that individual, how long that took, and what your hourly rate is. And then that information is provided to the court. And that's done by motion. So the person has to file a motion to get their fees approved prior to paying themselves. And then the court reviews that based on the criteria that they use to determine if that is reasonable. If there is a dispute regarding the fees, that goes before the probate master. And so in Davidson County, that's Beth Johnson. And she will have a full hearing over the fees, whether those are attorney's fees or fees for the conservator. But that's not something that goes through my office. We review the motions that involve fees, but we don't have a lot of say-so with regard to that. That is up to Judge Kennedy and the probate master.
So how difficult are some of these cases in terms of families fighting? And is there now a better process, because we know that these cases are out there, that the court basically does have, I mean, ultimately the court can file the order or get the order done, which says, okay, none of you can be conservator. We're going to appoint this person as conservator. if you need a visitation schedule, you can do that. Everything is open on the books, but that still doesn't stop the families from fighting. So how is that dealt with in the best way possible? Because I know that it can get nasty out there.
Yeah, it really can. It's dealt with on an individual basis, to be honest, Jim. I'll get calls from family members, I guess, making allegations against the conservator, which is typically their sibling. And that's something that I'll have to look into. So either I'll send a worker out to their house to review whatever it is, whether it be a person saying that they're not being bathed appropriately, they're not getting medication appropriately, or they're keeping me from my family member. If that occurs, that's something Judge Kennedy or Judge Mcclendon would have to deal with. I can imagine that they do not like to put visitation schedules in place for adults. But that does happen. And then when you have people that violate those visitation orders, which also happens, then that also comes before the court, and that has to be litigated, which is really sad, because when litigation is involved regarding a person under conservatorship, sometimes those attorneys' fees come from the respondent's estate, depending, or sometimes those attorneys' fees are paid, by the lawyers that are hired by the individuals that are fighting. There have also been instances where there have been disruptions at a nursing facility, and the facilities have told the siblings they're not allowed to come back. The judges don't have any control over the policies and procedures of those facilities. And so if the facility says they can't come back, they just can't come back. It really does get messy. Typically, it's when there's money involved. I have very few cases where there's no money involved, where the family is fighting the way that they're fighting. And I think that's just because a lot of people feel like the estate of the person under conservatorship is theirs prior to that person passing away and leaving it to them. That's just what I've seen from being in this office. And so that's typically how it's handled. I mean, I tell a lot of people, there's not a whole lot I can do about this fighting that you guys are having. I can tell you what is statutorily required. I can tell the other person what they should and should not do. But if there is a dispute that needs to be settled, that's something that the two judges will have to settle for them.
Okay. What was the Falk in Colombo? The Falk case, the Campbell case. What was? Do you know what that actually required the courts to have to do in terms of visitation?
The Campbell-Falk Act, it requires people not to withhold the person under conservatorship from their friends and family members. So they're required to make sure that that interested parties have the ability to see them. But
there are situations where, like the nursing homes may be able to restrict. Is that still the case? I mean,
because the nursing homes can do that if that person has caused a disruption within that nursing home. It's not typical that a nursing home is the conservator. It's typically the conservator fighting with the other people in the family that are causing the issue. I don't know that it happens often that a nursing home will have to ban a person from coming to their facility, but I imagine it happens. Well, I know that it has happened. Yeah.
It's I know those are difficult and just very, very sad situations.
Yeah.
All right, a couple more questions for you, and then we'll let you go, and you can rest after the tour de Nash. I know every so often a case does slip through, and something bad has happened. How does that happen? I know we were talking before you got on about one of those old cases where there was a lot of money that was taken away from a family. Those sound very rare. We don't hear many of those, but I assume if somebody is pretty clever and capable, they may be able to sneak through and get away with it. How do we don't have a lot of those. I know we had one recently with an attorney. It wasn't recently, it was a couple of years ago. How did that sneak through, and what do we do to make sure that doesn't happen anymore?
So not as to speculate as to what happened with those cases, but I believe the task force was put in place when John Clemens was conservator for 5 people, and he had conservatorships in Rutherford County and Davidson County. I'm not exactly sure what he did to his accountings to make it appear that he was performing up to his fiduciary responsibilities. What I do know is that he was siphoning money from those accounts, from those conservatorships, and took about over $1 million from those individuals. I think I don't know how it happened, but I think that he was smart enough to provide information to the courts where it looked like he was doing the things that he was supposed to do. And I think it probably also involved the family members not being either aware or as closely involved in the case. I'm not exactly sure. But because of that, that's when the task force was put in place in order to see how to make sure that that doesn't happen again. I would say that that is not happening in Davidson County now. We do a very good job of reviewing all of the accountings and the motions. And I think if it happens, it would happen where people are just doing things without alerting the court. So you're supposed to file for permission to sell real property. I think it very well could happen that a person would sell a house without getting court approval. Or you're supposed to ask the court prior to providing gifts to friends and family members. I think a person would just do it without notifying the court that that is done. And I think that's how it could happen. I mean, if a person is willfully disregarding the statutes or not listening to the attorney that's involved in their case, which we have seen, then you can have a lot of money being spent. And then we find out about it after the fact. I know there was one case we were working most recently where the person spent $40,000 on a car and they were attempting to buy a home without ever alerting the court or their attorney that they were doing that. We just happened to find out about it to prevent it from happening. But I think some of it is because people will do bad things sometimes. And so when they do that, then we find out about it after the fact and then try to rectify it at that point. Okay.
So, and there are obviously, everybody does all they can to make sure it doesn't happen. But if it does, you'll eventually catch it. Somebody will eventually report it or you'll find out. And then there are obviously steps that can be taken after that. Okay.
Yes.
Let me ask you one other question before I get to the last question. Because I was thinking about particularly families fighting. How often can they show up in court and say the same things over and over again? I mean, is there some type of, it would be like, brother and sister mad at each other, the sister files and says, I don't like the conservator or I don't like what they're doing. So they come into court, they argue over that. And then the brother files right behind her. So you could have this ongoing for a long time. Does that happen? I assume it does.
That does happen. I mean, you're a lawyer, you know that happens.
I know.
A person can
file. I'm asking you because I thought it sounded better coming from you. All right.
A person can file as many motions and petitions and as they want to. I mean, until the judge says you can't do this anymore, which is rare, as you know. I mean, I think it does get to the point where a judge is like, you can't file this same motion again. But if a person wants to keep paying attorney's fees, then I think they're allowed to continue to do so until it becomes something that is very egregious, so long as they're bringing up a different issue every time. Yeah. And I think that happens in all courts, not just probate court.
Okay, thank you. All right, a last question for you. And it didn't get asked this week, but somebody had been sending in the same question, which I think is a good one. And it says, it basically goes, if you were emperor for a day, the way I ask it is if you had a magic wand and you could fix a couple of things in this process, you got 5 minutes. What would you fix? If you could change anything about this process, what would you do?
All right. Well, I have a list, and you didn't even let me prepare for this, but I have a list. All right. Okay. So the first thing that I would do is either get the Supreme Court or the state legislature to pass a law or a rule that training is required for conservators. Currently in Tennessee, there is no training required for any conservator of any kind. And so our office has created training that can be used by anybody within the state. The Conservatorship Association of Tennessee has training. I know TCAD has training for all of their guardians, but essentially a person can become a conservator without any training or any prior knowledge of what it is that they need to do. So that would be the first thing that I would change. The next thing that I would change is that there needs to be more OCMs within the state of Tennessee. In Tennessee, like I said, Davidson County is the only county with an Office of Conservatorship Management. And within 95 counties, because I've called them all, Most counties don't know how many conservatorships they have or how many people they have under conservatorship, which is of concern to me, because if you don't know how many conservatorships there are, you don't know who you're charged with protecting. And I'm not saying that they're not protecting them or that there are any issues. It's just that there is no way to know how many conservatorships there are in Tennessee. If I had to guess, I would say there are about 10,000 conservatorships in Tennessee based on the research that I've done, but that's not to be certain. The other thing that I would do would be to have a registry of individuals under conservatorship. Like I said, we don't know how many people are under conservatorship. Maybe that's something TCAT can work on. I know you're leaving, but you can put that note in. We don't know who has conservatorships. So like with that Clemens case, he had conservatorships in both Rutherford County and Davidson County. And so we're overseeing Davidson County conservatorships, but who knows how many conservatorships an individual may have within another county. And if we had a registry, then we would be able to know if you, for instance, had 20 in 8 different counties. Well, I think it would be really easy for you to get away with doing some things if you had your conservatorship spread out. And so the state of Tennessee doesn't have that. I can't say that other states have that either. I know that is a goal that they have in California to have a registry, but they also don't have one. And so that would be another thing that I would wave a wand to have to happen. I think would be a really good thing for the state of Tennessee. There is another thing I want to talk about if I can.
You've got time, go ahead.
Okay, great. So we were receiving lots of calls from our office from parents who wanted to establish conservatorships for their children. And so they wanted to know how they could do that without spending $2,000 to $3,000 to do that. And so I started asking around to different places to find out if that was something, there was something that could be done, like through the legal aid societies and different things like that. And so it turns out that there was a law firm, or there is a law firm in Davidson County that had a pro bono initiative to help children in public schools get conservatorships for their parents to get conservatorships for them. And that was just a pro bono initiative that they had. And so I'm the chair of the public education committee for the Tennessee Bar Association. And one of the things we put in place was that we contacted all the legal aid societies across the state to find out if they wanted to participate in this pro bono conservatorship initiative. And so an individual with a child in public school within the state of Tennessee can go to the TBA's website and fill out this questionnaire, or they can call the OCM, and they will be directed to go through an application and screening process to determine if they are eligible for an attorney to be paired with them through the Legal Aid Society in order to help them establish their conservatorship at no legal cost to them, so long as they meet the financial threshold. And so that is one thing that I am spreading the word about, because there are children who are either born with disabilities or have been rendered disabled or incapacitated due to a car accident or whatever, and their parents may not have the money to hire legal counsel in order to establish a conservatorship, and they're going to have one. And so that is something that we are providing. Our office currently does the screenings for those, and the Legal Aid Society does the financial screenings for those. But if anybody within the state of Tennessee needs that service, it is there for them, and I hope people take advantage of it.
What a great program. What a great concept. What are the kids' ages?
18 to 22, typically. I've had some people call with 25-year-olds because somehow they've been able to continue making decisions for their child without a conservatorship. Okay. But typically 18 to 22, because you're still in public school during that time.
And what are you, is there a place to get more information on this if people are interested?
Yes, they can contact my office, or they can go to the TBA's website. On the TBA's website, it's a pro bono conservatorship initiative, and it has information about it as well.
Tennessee Bar Association. Okay, very good. Hey, Amy, we're out of time. This has been really, really interesting. Thank you so much for being our guest. Amy Bryant, Director, Office of Conservatorship Management. Great concepts, great program, really, really interesting. I'm going to spread the word and let people know. And you're getting lots of really very strong comments from judges and lawyers who are watching, saying what a great job you're doing. So
I can't see the comments. Oh,
well,
thank you everybody for the comments.
You will just have to trust me that they were there. But okay, no, I was watching. Next week is Dr. Andre Churchwell, Vice Chancellor at Vanderbilt University, Vice Chancellor of Equity and Diversity for the school. So that should be really, really interesting. Tune in next week. It is beautiful outside. Go outside and enjoy. Amy, again, thank you. You were great. I really appreciate you being on. Have a nice rest of the weekend, everybody, and we'll hopefully see everybody next week. Okay.
Thank you very much for having me. Bye.
Thanks, Amy.